We have a woman who was allegedly caught trying to steal land that she doesn't own. And she and her husband are facing $1 million lawsuit over dozens of other cases of real estate fraud. So
thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord.
Yes.
Caught, Lord.
Yes.
Thank you, Lord.
People are losing their homes, and I actually have some really important information that I'm going to share in just a moment that I actually learned yesterday. I was at a meeting with the Fulton County clerk who oversees a lot of stuff that happens with real estate, including, fraud. And yeah, I'm gonna get to that in just a moment. But to finish up with the introduction of this story, so there was a Texas husband and wife, a duo, if you will, and they're accused of falsely claiming ownership and selling properties that they did not own. And this is according to a lawsuit that was filed back in April by the Harris County Attorney's Office. And the couple is being sued for more than $1 million in damages. And it said that they falsely claimed ownership of at least 35 properties in Harris County. So that in and of itself is like, wow, falsely claiming that they own properties and then turning around to try and sell those properties for profit. That is real estate fraud. There's a lot of different types of real estate fraud, but that is one of them. And so I don't know. You brought this article to me. What were your thoughts when you read through it?
Well, first of all, I just want to start off by saying, I feel like every podcast I start off shaking my head and looking like this.
And that's the snapshot that I put on the thumbnail.
I'm focusing on smiling, even though this is really a sickening thing. But I've been hearing it happen more lately and recently. Mm-hmm. I think that people will, as time progresses, what I'm seeing is that people are finding any kind of way that they can to either take ownership or take up residence in property that they don't have to pay for, that they can make some sort of profit off of it, whether it be squatting or just now at this point, just downright deed fraud, just transferring the deed directly into their name. However, I don't really blame the people as much as I do the counties and whoever records it, because there was little to no oversight. From the research that I've done, it was very easy. You didn't even have to, I don't even think you had to show proof of identity before. In a lot of different jurisdictions, you just come in there and pay the fee, fill out the application, and boom, you didn't even have to prove that you were who you were saying you were, which is why it had become so prevalent. But I'm just glad that people are getting caught.
Yes.
Now, I think it's been happening just like that. I know I sent you an article probably about a month ago about this guy. He had like $1 million worth of real estate. His ex-girlfriend, he was older and his ex-girlfriend was younger, but still she transferred like 8 houses of his into her name during the course of their relationship. And he had no idea. And so when you get to talking about your, what you learned, I'm also going to kind of give a little way that people can remain more vigilant about that as well. But yeah, I think it's sickening. It's just something else that you have to watch out for and look out for. But I'm glad that the counties and things are making it more difficult now.
So with that, I'll get a little bit into some important information that I gleaned from yesterday's meeting. So again, I was at a meeting listening to some individuals here in Georgia that actually oversee this stuff. And one of the things that I found out is that there are actually a lot of states that do not have a system in place to be able to catch this stuff when it happens. So I've actually heard of individuals who have lost their properties due to squatters or due to fraud, but there are actually a lot of states that don't have a system in place on how to go back and determine something is, fraudulent or whatever. In some of the instances, there have been papers that were fraudulently filed in the public records. But once that stuff is filed in the public records, how do you go back and say, oh, wait, no, this actually wasn't me and everything? I discovered and learned that it was actually a lot harder than what most people may think, which is why when I would listen to these stories and I feel some sort of way, obviously some anger, some frustration, because you have a lot of times it happens to elderly people.
Yes.
They end up losing their homes and then they don't have the resources. They don't know who to reach out to. They might not have many family members that are, there with them, helping them, supporting them or whatever, taking them through this process. So they end up just losing their most valuable asset due to fraud and someone just stealing it out from under them. So I felt some sort of way about that. And I was like, why is it that it's so hard for the city to just do something about it? And to find out there are a lot of steps in the process. And once you have someone else who puts out a fraudulent stake or, claim to ownership, and that stuff starts to get filed, and now you have a paper trail, and maybe they're even paying taxes on the property, whatever it might be, to go back and say, well, no, this was actually my property and it was never sold and everything. But you have all these documents that say that it was, even though it's fraud. There's not really a system that was in place. And so part of the meeting that I was at yesterday actually spoke about a system. It's called React. There's another one called Fans. And these are systems that are specific to Georgia. So if you're listening to this and you live in a different state, do a little bit of research and see if your state has something similar to it. But with Georgia and Fulton County, you have a program called React, or a system, I guess you could say, called React, and it's spelled I think it's REAACT. And what it is it's a fraud. It doesn't prevent fraud, but it at least alerts you to when something has been filed in the public records on a property that you own. So for example, if you own a property in Fulton County and you sign up, create an account for React, you attach whatever property you want to attach to that. So if you own one property in Fulton County or 3 properties, it doesn't matter how many, you attach whatever property you own to that account that you have in the React system. And anytime something gets filed in the public records on that property, you will receive a notification about it. So again, it's not going to stop items from getting filed, but it'll at least allow you to get ahead of the game so that it's not years after the fact, which in a lot of instances, this does happen 6 months after the fact, years after the fact. People find out that there have been public records filed on my property and I had no idea, because unless you go and check public records, you have no idea who filed something, and now they've changed ownership of your property into their name or into someone else's name, or they've sold it to someone else that they didn't have the authority to sell it to.
Yeah, so, I think just like with cancer, early detection is best.
It is. So. Absolutely. And this is one of those ways that, at least with the React system, that will allow you to at least get that notification. Hey, someone just filed something in the public records for my property address. Let me go check and see what that was so that I can be proactive, making sure this is not fraud, because you can jump on it early, stop it, cut it off at the, at the onset, and make sure it doesn't become a bigger issue. The Fans system is statewide in Georgia.
That was going to be mine.
Oh, that was yours? Okay, well, you go ahead then. I don't want to take your thunder then.
No, you're not taking my thunder. It's okay. Because you said React was Fulton County specific, right?
It is, correct.
Okay, so yeah, statewide is Fans, and it's through GS. It's 3 C's, CCCA, GSCCCA. So it's fans.gsccca.org. And it stands for Filing Activity Notification System. And it lets you know, well, it's the same thing. You receive a notification when certain real estate and personal property records are filed with, indexed, and data is transmitted by clerks of Superior Court throughout the state of Georgia. You can opt in. It's voluntary, of course, but you can opt in, and it'll send you an electronic notification whenever any kind of document is filed, and select official county records. when it's transmitted into and so the GSCCCA stands for Georgia Superior Court Clerks Cooperative Authority.
Who's naming these things?
I don't know, honey. They ain't got nothing else better to do. And so, yeah, I think that's just something that any responsible property owner should do. If you consider yourself responsible, just to be proactive, just stay on top of it. So after you file a notification request for your name, choose add notification request to add a property address or additional names. And I think it's important to have both, because sometimes people will fraudulently do stuff in your name, but other times people will do it, with just the address.
Yes.
And so it'll allow you to receive email alerts. And, I don't think you're not going to get anything by snail mail. It's going to be email. So, please make sure that you all are checking your emails. Make sure that you add, whatever this email address is, add it to your important VIP senders, so that it never goes to spam or junk. That's going to be very important. So, yeah, that way you can take action immediately.
Yes. And I will say with the fan system, one of the differences between that and the React system is that with fans, it notifies you based on your name rather than the property address. So if you're like John Smith, then you're going to get a lot of notifications, because every time someone named John, every time something is filed in the public records under the name John Smith, you're getting notified. But how many John Smiths are there? If you have a more unique name, maybe you don't receive as many notifications. So that, I would say, is one of the advantages over the React system. Obviously, disadvantage being React is only in Fulton County. But one of the advantages is address specific. So with your particular address. But maybe there are some great systems that are just as great or even better in some other states that can serve a comparable purpose to helping to curb or at least notify you that, hey, there's some fraudulent stuff that might be going on, and can help you at least jump on that and get out in front of it. Another thing that I wanted to tie this into is one of the things that tends to be a pain point for a lot of people buying homes, which is documentation requirements. A lot of lenders ask for everything that you have had in the last 3 years, 2 years, depending upon the type of loan that you're getting and everything. So documentation requirements can be a source of frustration, but there's a reason why. And some of that has to do with fraud. So, I don't know. It's just, I get my fair share of earfuls, I guess you could say, when I'm asking.
I know you do. I already sent this information to y'all 3 times.
I needed 5. Go ahead and push send 2 more times. You want the house or not?
Your frustration never, ever, ever changes the mortgage loan officer's mind. They need the documentation. You know what? As a buyer's agent, especially if they're first-time home buyers, even if they're not, because sometimes you can kind of forget, just like having a baby, you forget about the bad part of it. You're like, oh, I want another baby type of thing. Listen, I tell them from the beginning, he's going to probably ask you for the same document 2 or 3 times. And then every time it moves to another stage, underwriting, final underwriting, they're probably going to ask you again. Just give it to them. Okay. Be prepared. I found that when you prepare your clients ahead of time, they handle it a lot easier. Because I know how I was. When my mom refinanced her home, and I actually had to provide some documentation because her name was on my mortgage, but she wasn't paying anything for it. Her name was just on my mortgage. And they were hounding me like I was the one applying for the loan. And the reason why I was laughing is because I remember actually getting frustrated. Even though I had been through this before and I literally do this for a living, I was getting frustrated. I was like, y'all have asked for everything. I said, y'all have asked for a lock of hair from my firstborn, my last lottery pick 6 numbers, my last pap smear and blood test results. What else do y'all want? I went off on them. I said, now you should know better than that.
Yeah, I had a client actually, this was about a month and a half ago, who was like, goodness, Brent, what else do you want? He was like, you want a sample of my blood too? You want to know what my blood type is? It was an exact quote. And I was like,
well,
look, man,
actually,
I was like, look, I don't want to ask you I don't want to submit more documents because that's more work for me too. However, I'm not the final say in this thing until the underwriter says we have enough of everything we need to clear this file. I've got to keep asking for stuff. Hopefully you're not getting asked the same document multiple times, even though it does happen. Hopefully it's something where, you only have to submit the same document once, but it does happen where it might be twice. And sometimes it's just because sometimes a document gets lost in the submission. Sometimes it could be that you're submitting them in multiple different ways, because we have a portal that you can upload documents to, but then sometimes I'll get documents emailed, and then other times I'll have people text me PDFs, and I'm like, oh my goodness, because now I got to transfer it from my phone to my email, so I can download it from my email to put it into our portal, and it's just so many steps where things can get lost in translation, essentially. But the crux of it is, all of this is, one, to make sure that we have all of the documentation needed to verify that you can qualify for the loan, you make the income that you make, you have the assets that you need to have, but that you are who you say that you are. There is actually a story that I heard about where, and it was actually the lady that it happened to was who I was hearing it from. I'm not gonna, put any names out there, but basically what happened was this lady was she's a loan officer and she was financing a home, and she, was receiving documentation from the buyer of the home who was going to be borrowing the money and getting the loan. But throughout this entire process, she had never spoken with the buyer on the phone. Everything was happening via email. So, in this digital age, that's common. A lot of people do stuff online. You have mortgage companies that can do an entire loan for you, and you never have to actually call someone. You just go through their online prompts and you just do it all through their system. Well, that's kind of how this was happening, except it was with the loan officer, but she never spoke to the borrower or the buyer who was borrowing the money. And so, long story short, closes on the home. It's like $400,000 that goes out for this home purchase and everything, goes to this seller and everything. And about 2-3 months later, gets a call. And it's like, hey, I'm such and such that owns this property that I'm told you just, financed the purchase for to this other borrower. Well, what ended up happening was the individual who was claiming they were the seller of this property, who, again, no one had actually spoken to on the phone, actually wasn't the owner of the property. The owner had been away from the property on business for like a couple months. And seller came in, or the fraudulent seller came in and claimed they were owning the property, put it up for sale, had someone buy it. The lender wires them $400K, and then the seller disappears. And so that's essentially how that happened. Well, the real seller comes back, or the real owner of the property comes back and finds someone living in their home. And the owners are like, well, we own this. We just bought it from the seller. They were like, well, I'm the owner of the property and I didn't sell it. And so it ends up being this big thing. They ended up getting it, smoothed over, because one of the good things that you have is title insurance and mortgage insurance, which can help with a lot of that stuff. And so in this case, insurance kicked in and helped to make the owner whole, because the owner actually had rights to get their property back, which means that money that the buyer, who thought they were purchasing it from the actual seller, spent, on inspections, appraisals, all that stuff, that's just gone, because the real owner is their property, or the owner could just, take whatever the equivalent cash value of the property of what it was worth. And the owner was fine letting the property go as long as they received the money. So they took the money and the buyer was able to stay in the property, but still that was money that was lost due to fraud because a $400,000 check was sent to a fraudulent seller. And then another $400,000 check had to be sent to the actual owner of that property who should have received those funds for this house, which never should have been sold in the first place. But
thank God for title insurance. I mean,
yeah,
anybody that ever skips out on that because it's an additional cost, as an agent, we should never, ever be advising our clients to skip out on that title insurance because you just never know. I don't care how much of a chain of title search the closing attorney thinks that they're doing. That is just something that is a expense that you should not ever pass up.
and it's a one-time expense. It's not a monthly expense like
That's right.
mortgage insurance. You pay it one time upfront at closing, and then you never pay for it again. And it protects you for the entire time that you own that home.
Yes. Yes.
So usually it's like, I don't know, 700, 800 bucks, sometimes 900 bucks, but you pay it one time and it protects you for the whole time you own that home. So, I mean, to me, that's something that's priceless for you to be able to have so that you don't end up in this situation where now you're losing your home due to some, fraudulent stuff that's happening. And it still does happen again, because to get back to what I was saying earlier with, you have a lot of states that don't have a system in place. I discovered again in the meeting yesterday, this is something that there are some individuals that are trying to work on putting a program in place or process in place to help not only identify this, but allow people to work through, because it's one of those things like, if you find out that, hey, someone has fraudulently taken ownership of my home, do you call 911? And then when you call the police are like, it's not an egregious act in the sense of someone that's armed just came to my home and threatened my life, because it doesn't happen like that. So it's
Right.
like, the police are like, well, how do we know you own the home? And then if they look in the court records, they may have had these fraudulent papers filed in the so it looks like they own the home, not that you own the home. And there's not a system in place for them to be able to prove that you own the home. The courts say that they own the home because even though it's fraud, that's what's in the public records. And so it's a lot to be able to try and combat this, but you need to be aware of it. That's all I'll say. You need to be aware of it so that you can do some proactive measures early on. And one of those things is signing up for a system, if there's one in place in the county or state where you live in, so that you can get notified anytime someone files something in the public records, either under your name or under a property that you own.
Yeah, going back to those documentation requirements, a lot of times people lie about the income that they make, whether they're making income and they're not reporting it due to tax purposes, especially for self-employed borrowers, or they have like a little side business, and then they just want you to count that money. And the reason why mortgage loan officers ask for so much documentation is because they have to trace every penny of where it comes from. And so I've known a lot of times when people are making that side income, you can't just turn in a bank statement, especially if you already have a W-2 or 1099 from some other contract work. They will make you file a tax return for that before you can even consider that as income. And Frederick, you and I have talked about different situations where, there was people that owned more property than what they were letting on. And, a lot of people feel like you're being too invasive. You're asking for too much information. What does this have to do? What does that have to do with this? But when it comes to documentation, and your obligations, your monthly obligations, if you own that property outright, good for you, kudos. But a lot of times there are mortgages on these other properties that they feel like they don't have to disclose. And that's going to affect how much money you're being lent. That's going to affect, based on how much income you're bringing in, that's going to affect how much they ultimately lend you. They do not want anyone to get in over their head. It's just like people's ability to fight temptation. you always overestimate your ability to fight temptation, before you're being tempted. And then once
Yeah.
you're being tempted, it's like, you know what? I don't guess I wasn't as strong as I thought I was. It's the same thing when it comes to how much of a financial obligation you're able to take on. Only then do you start looking at, what, my Netflix and Starbucks habit, my pay-per-view habit is really kind of affecting my finances, So people, when they're so excited about something, especially purchasing a house, they don't tend to think very clearly. And so it's the mortgage company's job to be responsible where you're not being responsible. So, let them do their job, cooperate with them, be frustrated all you want, but yelling at the mortgage officer, you have to understand that there are underwriters. The mortgage loan officer has management. They have so many different tiers of people that they have to answer to, that they have to submit files to. They're just the one, they're like the middleman, so to speak. They're the one that's actually talking to you. And so, just like you don't want anyone getting mad at you while you're doing your job for a policy that you didn't even make. Maybe it came from upper management or maybe it came from corporate. It's the same thing. And so I found that when I explain it this way to people, it makes the process so much smoother. So any agents that are watching this, I definitely recommend taking that route with your clients. Like I said, whether they're first time home buyers or not, because oftentimes they do kind of even the experienced home buyers that are financing properties kind of forget that part of the process. So.
Yeah, no, definitely. And remember, your loan officer does not get paid until your home closes. So they are not trying to keep you from purchasing a home because their check depends on it. So
right.
Trust me,
Right.
we want your home to close as well. And we're advocating for you to find whatever way we can find to make that happen. But it's going to require, in some instances, a lot of documentation. And if you find a loan where it doesn't require as much documentation,
run, honey.
Yeah, either
Be
that
grateful. You know what? At the end of the day, I'm grateful, because what if there was somebody that's literally out there pretending to be Jilly Jones? I would want the more oversight. I would want more obstacles and more conditions to be put up.
Absolutely.
So that either by the time that they get to the finish line or before then, I either find out, or at some point during the process, they're found to be a fraud because they can't come up and produce whatever additional documentation is being asked. I mean, if we look in the media right now with Todd and Julie Chrisley, who were just pardoned by President Trump, it was a very serious offense what they did when they forged those documents to make it seem as though they were making more money than they really were, in order to qualify for a home loan, of epic proportions, because they were on TV and they were wanting to keep up a certain image.
Yeah.
And that is a punishable offense, people. It's not just something, you're going to get a slap on the wrist. That is a punishable by jail time offense. Even mortgage officers have been sent to jail for, forging documents or, making loans to go through. It's not a good thing. And, when you're caught, like the story that we opened up with, when you get caught, you're going to jail. You know what I'm saying? You're going to jail.
You are, for sure. So, and I will second that. I'm glad for all of the additional measures, as much as it's a headache.
Yes.
My wife is actually one of the people who, when she gives her credit card to a cashier or somebody and they say, "Hey, can I see your ID?" She will actually thank them. Thank you for asking. Because a lot of people, and my wife's been a cashier before. She's like, a lot of people are, how old do I look? Who do you think you think I'm the type of person that they get so frustrated and everything, and they start fussing at, the wrong person, essentially. But my wife is actually someone who will say, thank you for asking, because it's like, this very well could be someone that has stolen my credit card, and now you're just going to let them swipe however much money and act like it was them. So thank you for at least doing something or putting an extra barrier in there to try and prevent something fraudulent from happening. So,
Yes.
Yeah.
No, nobody asks these days. Did you hear about that lady? Her son robbed a bank and then he took his own life. But right before he committed suicide, when he was on the run, he called his mama and told her to check the deed to her house. She checked the deed, and she's now facing eviction from the home that she's been since 1996. She's owned it since 1996, so she'd been there even before that. And legal documents were showing that investors purchased the house. Her son filed a forged deed, and now those investors are trying to remove her from the property. And you know, so her son is the one that did it. Then he robbed the bank, committed suicide so he wouldn't get caught. But right before he did, he was like, by the way, check the deed. And now, you know, she spent 17 grand in legal fees. And she's, you know, she's an elderly woman. She's like in her late 70s. She can't afford any more legal fees.
Wait, so investors purchased her home? She's
been left to grapple with this. This happened in Texas.
But she didn't know they purchased it?
No. This story just came out 6 days ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, but her son did that. You know, he was just, you know, going around committing all kinds of financial crimes. And, you know, that last one that he did when he robbed the bank. But I think what was so beautiful, and I guess it was beautiful, is that she was like, you know, well, I forgive him. Because at this point, you know, what's the point in holding a grudge? You know, but like, that is crazy. Your own mama.
So he's the one that sold her house to these investors? Oh, wow.
And now they trying to put her out. And she's like, you know, where else is she gonna go? Now she does have another house, I think they said, but she's trying to use that for rental income so she can live. You know what I'm saying? So she, you know, ooh, it's a mess, honey.
As times get more and more challenging, I hate to say this, oftentimes you will find that crime picks up and people start finding more creative ways to commit, you know, fraud or commit crimes, you know, and then they will label it as, oh, you know, a need to survive, whatever it is that they use to justify it. You do find that in real estate, especially real estate being one of those industries that has seen a huge increase in prices, there's a lot of value in owning real estate. And there are a lot of people out there who have no ill feelings toward swiping your most valuable asset right out from under you and running off with it. The lady the lady that we opened up this broadcast about, one of the ways that someone started catching on to her was that she was claiming that she owned a property that she really didn't own. And then she was trying to sell it for like $25,000. The property was worth way more than that, but she was trying to sell it for like way less than what it was worth, which threw up some red flags to the agent. And, you know, they were like, okay, something doesn't seem right about this. And how did you get this property? Oh, it was inherited. I inherited it from, you know, family member or whatever.
What'd she say? I just need the money because of taxes. I need to just get rid of it, the liability or whatever. So
exactly. She said she had tax debt and she needed to get rid of it and everything. So, you know, there are some red flags that were out there, but yeah, real estate is, in my opinion, one of the most valuable assets that you have out there. I think it's the greatest asset that you have out there. Hence the name of the podcast.
Greatest asset community, honey.
Yeah. So I think it's the greatest asset out there because, I mean, obviously there are businesses that are worth a lot of money, but then, I mean, those businesses have to operate from somewhere. And that somewhere is real estate, you know, whether there's a building somewhere, whether it's you know, even Amazon can't, you know, do business completely virtually. You've got Amazon warehouses and stores popping up everywhere. Even a virtual business needs to have servers stored somewhere to house all of this data, essentially, that they have, especially YouTube with the, I don't know, trillions of gigabytes of data they must have to for everybody that's posting every minute of the day on the YouTube. But in any case, fraud is definitely something that, I hate to say it, I feel like it's going to be an issue. It's going to continue to be an issue. I'm glad to see that there's some people that are proactively in some counties and, you know, leaders in place, elected officials, if you will, that are proactive in fighting against fraud. Because I just don't like seeing people who've worked so hard to accomplish something especially like purchasing a home, which is a big deal, just lose it just like that. And then there's no systems in place for that individual to be able to recoup what was stolen from them. So yeah, with that, that's what we have for you. So thank you for taking the time to tune in. Every Friday, we'll be dropping another episode. And Tuesdays, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, Home Finance Hacks. I'll be going live again, just bringing some tips, tricks, some tactics, tips to help you save money, thousands, maybe tens of thousands of dollars in purchasing a home as well. So that's what we have for you. Thank you for tuning in.
Well, let me say one more thing.
Oh, yeah. What you got? What you got?
I want everybody to watch The Beekeeper on Netflix. Everybody that's thinking about committing fraud, watch The Beekeeper. That is an excellent movie. It stars Jason Statham.
Oh, so there's some fighting in it.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's about a lady who she was an elderly lady and she got conned.
Oh, he plays the elderly lady. Okay.
Over like $2 million. And it was this big, huge operation set up. And he went after every single last one of them. And he didn't stop till he got revenge on everybody. It was blood and bullets and bombs. And I mean, just some of everything. So y'all better be careful and stop doing wrong. All right.
Or there's someone out there named something similar to Jason Statham that might take revenge on those old ladies that yeah. Someone used to watch some wrestling back in the day.
WWE or whoever it was, yes, sir, you better believe it.
WCW and WWE and WF, I think it was at one point.
Yes, Lord.
So many things, yeah. In any case, yes, The Beekeeper. I might have to check that out now.
Check it out. Yes, sir.
But yeah, till next time, take care, be blessed, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.